Hey everyone, Simon here from Top Tennis Training, and in this video I'm going to show you a simple trick to get more power but also bite on your slice backhand. Now the slice backhand can be a great weapon for you to have in your game. Often club players think about it as just a defensive shot, something to use on the full run just to get the ball back in play. Now if you execute the slice well, two things should happen. It should stay low and it should have a lot of backspin. Both of these things make it very hard for your opponent down there to deal with. Now if you think about a normal topspin drive, if I drive my forehand on my backhand, it's going to be bouncing and it's going to kick up off the court. So it's going to be rising to my opponent. So most of those shots my opponent can hit at waist height or even higher. So attacking those type of balls, if I don't hit it really well, becomes much easier for my opponent than if I slice a shot and it bounces low and stays low. So if I execute the slice well, it should stay low and it should become a very hard shot for my opponent to deal with, because the ball is going to be down by knee level or even lower. So the first thing they'll have to do is lift that ball up, and attacking that type of shot is much harder for my opponent. Now because of this, I can use the slice backhand in many different situations in a point. The first one would be when I'm pushed out wide on my backhand side. I can hit that slice and neutralize play with one shot. The second one would be when I'm approaching the net. If I execute a good slice, the ball's going to stay low, and for my opponent down there to pass me is much harder on a ball that's down here.
Oh, nice.
And the third option would be when I want to mix up play. So I might drive my shot a couple of times and then hit that slice to change the dynamics of the point. My opponent down there is dealing with a high ball if I hit an aggressive topspin, and then a low ball. This forces them to change the way that they play shot by shot. So all of these scenarios will only work if I execute the slice well. And too often what club players will do is they'll just dink that slice back in. It becomes a floater and it becomes very easy for the opponent down there to attack. So if you're someone who's doing this, then this video is definitely for you. Now for this trick to work, you'll need to be using a continental grip for your slice backhand. If you're using an Eastern forehand grip, or even worse, a semi-Western forehand grip, you won't be able to use this trick on your slice. Now often at club level, what we'll see players doing is taking the racket back quite low, and they'll push the ball, they'll guide the ball using a more linear swing path, or even a low to high swing path. Now when we look at Federer, who has possibly the best slice of all time, what we see is he prepares with his racket above his left shoulder. So from the front on position, he's preparing like so. Now what this allows him to do is change the swing path depending on the height of the ball. He can attack those higher balls using a slice backhand. And this is something that's impossible if you've got the racket down here. So the first thing you want to do is lift that racket up above your left shoulder. Now some players will lift the racket up here, but what they'll do is take this left hand off, their non-hitting hand off, too early. So it becomes like this. They're preparing, they take it off, and then they just cut the ball with their hitting arm and the racket. Now if we look at Federer, and we look at some of the best slicers in the world, when they take the racket back, they're not just preparing the racket with this left hand, but they're pulling the racket back with this left hand. So the left hand is not just doing the preparation with the racket and getting it higher than the left shoulder. What they're doing is pulling the racket back. And this is creating some tension in the wrist of my hitting hand. So I'm pulling the racket back now using my left hand. So I'm holding the throat of the racket and I'm pulling the racket back like so. Now by pulling the racket back, what I'm doing is almost creating a slingshot effect on my slice. Now a very easy way for you to understand this concept is using a flick. So if I want to flick somebody standing next to me, I'll do this. Now if I flick only using my middle finger, so I take my thumb away from the motion and I do just this, the power is going to be extremely limited because I'm using the muscles of just my middle finger. There's no tension before I release the finger. But if I want to flick somebody with power, what I'll do is use my thumb. So I'll use my thumb to pull back the middle finger and stop it from being released. So my middle finger is trying to go forward, is trying to release, but my thumb is holding it back. So I'm creating that tension in the middle finger by using the thumb to pull it back. So my middle finger is being held back by the thumb, and then when I release it, there's a lot of energy stored that's being released onto that flick. That same concept applies on my slice backhand. By pulling the racket back like so, creating that tension, creating that lag in the wrist, that massive leverage, what I'm doing is then when I release, I'm releasing that tension. So by pulling the racket back, I'm creating more leverage in the wrist and the racket head. So leverage is basically force over the ball, and I'm creating this L shape in my racket and my hand. So I'm pulling the racket back now, creating that L shape, and I'm also creating that tension. Now what will happen is when I release the racket head, when I let go with this left hand, on the forward phase, I'm then releasing that tension and allowing the right hand to do the job. So next time you're out on the practice courts and you're working on your slice, try this method out. Instead of just preparing using the left hand, feel that the left hand is pulling the racket back, creating that tension in the wrist, so that when you actually release that left hand and you let go, there's a lot of tension being released on that slice backhand. Now experiment with how much you actually need to pull that racket back. If you do it too much, you might find that you end up flopping the wrist during the contact zone and losing control of your slice. So you might start off by just doing it slightly so that you feel that motion. Once you get better at it, you'll be able to really pull this racket back and create that massive tension in the arm and in the racket head, so that when you do release it, you can generate that massive power. Now along with this preparation, what you want to feel is that your swing path will change depending on the height of the ball. So if I have a higher ball, I definitely don't want to be slicing and going forward with my racket. What I want to feel is that I'm going from a high position to a low position. And this is something that we'll see Federer doing often. He's cutting down the back of the ball with that slice. So he's going from a high position, he's coming down. If the ball is a medium height, I won't cut down so much, but I'll go a little bit forward with the racket as well. So I'll go from this position this way. And if the ball is quite low, I don't want to start so high with my racket head. So I'll start slightly above the left shoulder, and then as I make contact, I'll go with a more linear swing path, or even a low to high swing path. This will allow me to lift that slice up and get it over the net. So this trick will work best on those higher or medium height balls. You don't really want to be doing it on a low ball because you'll lose control of your slice. So on those higher balls, I can really pull this racket back and really feel the tension here, so that when I do release, I'm using that high to low swing path. Now if you've enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and make sure you turn on that notification bell so you get notified whenever we release a new video. If you're only a subscriber but haven't got the bell switched on, then YouTube won't let you know when we have a new video released. So turn on that notification bell right away so that YouTube will always let you know when we release a new video. Signing off, Simon from TTT, all the best and see you soon.